Welcome to Last Moments. Today we expose the viral trends where millions of views met the most devastating consequences. From friends surfing on top of a moving train to a desperate new dad whose attempt at a hallucination challenge ended in the worst way possible. It was the 13th of July, 2014, and Sao Paulo was still loud with horns and flags, the streets full of people who had spent a month at the center of the world and were not yet ready to let it go. Kaique Ferreira was 20 years old, restless by nature, and easily lit up by an idea. His two closest friends had been beside him since childhood. Rodrigo Almeida, 19, was the athletic one, the boy who had played youth football seriously enough that a scout had watched him twice before a knee injury at 16 quietly closed that door. He had never fully stopped grieving it, channeling what remained of that competitive hunger into anything physical, anything that required nerve. Wesley Cardoso, 21, was different in almost every way. Quieter, more deliberate, the kind of young man who thought things through and then did them anyway because he had never learned how to say no to the people he loved. He worked early morning shifts at a bakery in Tatuapé and sent half his wages home to his mother in Minas Gerais every month without being asked. He was the most responsible person in the group, which had never once stopped him from going along. Kaique had spent months watching videos of kids riding on the outside of subway trains. He kept sending the best clips to his friends, watching them over and over until he knew every move by heart. The way they stood, the way they stretched out their arms, so much so that it felt like he had done it before. He always told his friends they should try it one day. That night, walking away from the viewing stadium after the World Cup final, the roar of the crowd still buzzing in their ears, they were reeling with excitement from the final match. Adrenaline was high and they decided to try train surfing. Rodrigo agreed without hesitation. Wesley hesitated but soon nodded. Kaique said he would handle the camera. He had been planning the shot in his head for months. The worst things usually happen in the moment where you feel like anything is possible. They boarded the roof at a slow section of elevated track just east of Bras Station, pulling themselves up one after another into the warm night air. The train was line 3, the red line, heading east toward Corinthians at Aquara. Kaique raised his phone. Rodrigo and Wesley found their footing, spread their arms, and grinned into the camera. For 40 seconds, the train ran straight and everything looked exactly the way the videos had promised. The red line bends sharply just before Tatuapé Station. If you were sitting inside, you would barely notice it. Just a small tilt. But on the roof, traveling at 40 miles per hour, that same bend hit like a sudden shove from nowhere. Rodrigo's feet lifted straight off the metal the moment the train swung around the curve. There was nothing close enough for him to grab, nor was there a warning. His body was thrown sideways, toward the outer edge, and he was gone before he could even reach for something to hold. Wesley saw it happen, and without thinking, he stepped toward his friend to catch him. It was the worst thing he could have done. The train was already pulling hard in that direction, and the roof was smooth and curved and had no grip. His foot slipped, and he hit the surface and slid just 2 short feet, and then he fell over the edge too. They fell from the same edge, seconds apart, into the same stretch of street below. Kaique drove both hands into the roof ridge and held on. He sure did not like his life because his life depended on it, regretting every decision he made up to that moment. The phone recorded for 11 more seconds before he closed the camera app. Emergency services recovered both men from the street below the elevated track within the hour. Rodrigo had landed on the roof of a parked delivery vehicle directly below the curve, suffering a catastrophic skull fracture and a severed cervical spinal cord. Injuries that were unsurvivable on impact. Wesley was found 90 feet farther along the line after landing in the roadway, where the impact fractured 9 ribs that pierced his lung and heart. Neither man regained consciousness. Kaique was the only survivor. He stayed on the train until it reached the next station, where he alerted emergency services. But by then, there was nothing anyone could do for Rodrigo and Wesley. Both families were notified before 2 in the morning and made formal identification at the city morgue the following day. While the world was celebrating World Cup champions, they were mourning their sons. 2 friends fell from the same train on the same night. And somewhere in Los Angeles, 2 friends were planning a prank that would shock everyone, including them. It was on the 17th of November, 2022. In a rented mansion outside Los Angeles, the hedges were still strung with cameras from the week before, the driveway lined with unopened delivery boxes, the whole property humming with ring lights left on overnight. The house belonged to 5 content creators who had built their following on escalating pranks, staging fake emergencies, and hidden camera stunts for higher view counts. Derek, 24 years old, was the self-appointed ringleader, known for reading comments and treating audience hunger for chaos as a mandate. 3 days before the incident, he decided the next video needed to top everything the house had posted: a staged home invasion, complete with a masked intruder breaking in while the roommates screamed on camera, unaware it was one of their own. Rick Hagervys was 21, the newest member of the house, having joined 2 months earlier after his own small prank channel caught Derek's attention. A third-year film production student, he supported himself working part-time at a camera rental shop where he'd learned to rig hidden lenses into household objects. Moving into the house felt like a shortcut to the career he wanted, and he treated every stunt as an audition for a bigger life. Quieter than the others, he had privately told Derek 2 days earlier that the invasion plan felt like too risky, only to be talked back into it with a promise that this video would finally push the house past 1 million subscribers. I'm adding that to the list of things that can change a person's assessment of risk. 1 million subscribers. What none of them accounted for was that Priya, one of the roommates, had invited her boyfriend over without telling the others. Edwin Bishop, 23, was a first-year police academy cadet who legally owned a handgun and held a valid California concealed carry permit issued before entering the academy. At 15, Edwin had come home early from a family trip, only to find an armed robber already inside the house, who panicked and opened fire before fleeing. Both of Edwin's parents were killed in the hallway that night, and the trauma had steered his entire adult life, drawing him toward law enforcement out of a need to never again feel that powerless. Friends knew Edwin remained deeply affected by the murders, and instructors had remarked that he reacted with unusual urgency during force-on-force training scenarios, though he had met every requirement to remain in the academy. Now this is beginning to look like a setup for disaster. Rick entered the bar through the back door, slipping into the kitchen in the dark. He moved quietly, unaware that Edwin had already woken to the sound. Edwin stepped out of the bathroom just as Rick came into view. Rick, sticking to the script, raised a prop weapon toward him, playing the part of the intruder for the camera. Edwin, seeing only the mask and the weapon pointed his way, drew his own firearm and fired. Rick dropped to the kitchen floor. Priya and the other housemates, hearing the gunshot, rushed out of their rooms. They found Rick on the ground and pulled off the mask, realizing too late who it was. Someone called emergency services immediately, but despite paramedics' efforts, Rick succumbed to his injury and was pronounced dead at the scene. The autopsy confirmed a single gunshot wound. Investigators concluded that, given the darkness, the ski mask, and the apparent forced entry, Edwin had reasonably believed an armed intruder had entered the house. Investigators reviewing the footage alongside Edwin's documented history ruled the shooting justified self-defense. No charges were filed. The twist came when investigators found messages showing Derek had pushed the stunt against Rick's hesitation, telling him it needed to feel real or it would flop. Prosecutors reviewed the case but declined to file charges, concluding the legal threshold for criminal liability had not been met. Over the following days, sponsors terminated their partnerships, and the platform eventually removed the channel for violating its policies. In the end, a video meant to manufacture fear collided with a 7-year-old trauma that never fully healed. The next story belongs to a man who watched every fire challenge video he could find and never saw a single one that showed what fire actually does to synthetic fabric. It was on the 10th of April, 2015, in Phoenix, Arizona. It was a warm spring afternoon and temperatures had already climbed into the mid-80s, making it feel more like early summer. And a dangerous new challenge was spreading across social media, and someone was about to increase his own temperature. Joshua Hill was 26 years old and worked as a carpenter. He had built his own little furniture workshop from nothing, spending long hours carefully shaping wood into pieces he was truly proud of. More than anything, he wanted people to notice his work. He started making videos of himself working and things he built and posting them online, hoping new customers would find him, but not any people were watching. Meanwhile, his bills kept piling up and his savings kept shrinking. So he started paying attention to what other people were posting, the kinds of videos that gained traction and thousands of views. What he saw made him uncomfortable, but it also made him curious. The fire challenge was everywhere that season. Clip after clip of people briefly setting themselves alight before stepping away unharmed, laughing, racking up hundreds of thousands of views in hours, and Joshua watched enough of them to convince himself that the stunt was manageable if he kept it short, if he planned carefully, if he had people nearby to help. Of course, every plan looks perfect until the moment of execution. On a Saturday afternoon, he invited 2 friends to the flat rooftop above his workshop to film the video, and they brought blankets to smother the flames, and they talked through the plan, and they believed they had thought of everything. Joshua put on an old synthetic work jacket over a t-shirt, poured a flammable liquid across the outside of the jacket, and gave his friends the signal to start recording. The moment the lighter touched the fuel, the fire spread faster than any of them had imagined. It burnt across the jacket in an instant. The fabric was synthetic, and instead of burning away, it began to shrink and melt, pressing hot against his skin. The pain hit Joshua like nothing he had ever felt before, sharp and overwhelming. Every plan he had made, every thought he had in his head, vanished in a single second. And before either of his friends could take a single step toward him, he was already moving. Sprinting hard across the rooftop with the blankets still in their hands, and by the time they started after him, the gap between them was already too wide. And that, my friends, is what I call a reality check. His friends screamed for him to stop, lunging toward him with the blankets, but the smoke was thick and the heat was blinding, and Joshua could not hear anything except the sound of his own panic, and he crossed the rooftop in seconds. And by the time he saw the edge, he was already at it. He fell nearly 20 feet onto the concrete loading area below, striking the back of his head and upper neck on impact. His friends rushed to him within seconds and put out the last of the flames, but Joshua was not moving. They called for help straight away. When the paramedics arrived, they found him with no heartbeat and no breathing. They did everything they could, right there on the ground, trying as hard as possible to bring him back. It was not enough. Joshua was pronounced dead where he lay. A post-mortem examination found that Joshua had suffered catastrophic blunt force trauma, including a severe skull fracture and a high cervical spinal cord injury that cut off the brain's control of breathing and circulation almost instantly. And while he had also sustained serious burns across portions of his upper body, investigators concluded that the fall was the cause of death, not the fire. People who knew Joshua said he had never wanted to hurt himself, that he genuinely believed the challenge was survivable because every video he had ever watched showed someone walking away. But what he never knew was that the ones who didn't ever make it were not online. He had not been trying to be reckless, only noticed. And in the end, it was not the flames that took him, but the single panicked decision to run from them. Joshua attempted his stunt only once. The next person turned his own into a monthly competition until it became the last dare he ever took. It was the 27th of January, 2018, and across suburban Columbus, Ohio, the winter air was sharp and still, porch lights glowing warm against the dark, neighborhoods quiet in the way that ordinary Saturday evenings tend to be, giving no sign that anything unusual was about to happen inside one of those homes. 31-year-old Ryan Carter worked as a journeyman electrician, a job that demanded precision, discipline, and long hours on construction sites throughout central Ohio. During the week, he was known by co-workers as dependable and level-headed. Outside of work, however, he was fiercely competitive. Since their early 20s, Ryan and his 4 best friends had made a little tradition out of their monthly meetups. Every time they got together, they would turn it into a friendly eating competition. Hot wings, giant burgers, drinking races, anything anyone could come up with. Whatever the challenge was, Ryan almost always won. His friends had come to think of him as someone with a stomach made of steel. Nothing seemed to beat him. So, when their January gathering came around, nobody was shocked that Ryan was once again the one everyone expected to win. That evening, the group was scrolling through videos circulating online when someone mentioned the Tide Pod Challenge, a viral internet trend in which people filmed themselves eating laundry detergent pods. The conversation quickly turned into another contest. Ryan and the friend who most often came close to beating him agreed to see who could consume the most. Just how they escalated from competing with edibles to inedible objects never ceases to amaze me. The others watched from the couch, drinking and cheering them on, assuming it was just another reckless but harmless dare. The first pod burst inside Ryan's mouth, releasing concentrated detergent that immediately burned his lips, tongue, and throat. His opponent stopped after one, unable to push through the pain. But Ryan kept going, unwilling to lose. Within moments, his body rejected what he had swallowed, and he bent forward and began vomiting violently. Between gasps, he tried to wave everyone away, insisting he was fine. Then another forceful bout of vomiting caused some of the detergent to enter his airway instead of leaving through his mouth. Ryan stumbled backward, grabbing at his throat. He tried to say something but could not get enough air to speak. He coughed and coughed, each breath coming faster and more desperate than the last. Then things got worse. A thick, foamy liquid began appearing around his mouth, and his lips started turning blue. At this point, his friends knew something was terribly wrong. One of them called for help immediately, while another knelt beside Ryan, trying to keep him sitting up as he struggled to breathe. Surely they kept their fingers crossed while praying that he comes back from this one. Paramedics transported Ryan to hospital where doctors found critically low oxygen levels and diagnosed severe chemical aspiration. The detergent had coated the lining of his lungs and triggered a wave of chemical inflammation. Emergency staff intubated him and placed him on mechanical ventilation, but the injury was already spreading through both lungs. He developed acute respiratory distress syndrome, a condition in which the lungs lose the ability to transfer oxygen into the blood, even with maximum medical support. Through the night, despite maximum ventilator support, his oxygen levels remained critically low. The prolonged lack of oxygen placed increasing strain on his heart and other organs. Less than 24 hours after the challenge began, Ryan suffered cardiac arrest caused by respiratory failure and could not be revived. The medical examiner ruled his death accidental. Chemical aspiration had caused catastrophic lung injury leading to cardiac arrest. What began as a monthly tradition among 5 lifelong friends ended in a loss none of them believed was possible. Ryan's iron stomach was never the problem. The problem was something no stomach was built to survive. The next story moves to Portland, where a man went live on the worst night of his life and let his audience choose what happened next. It was the 19th of November, 2021, and a quiet Friday evening had settled over the city of Portland, Oregon, where the streets were still and most people had already retreated indoors. And somewhere in a small apartment, a laptop screen glowed in the dark as a live stream counted its viewers in the corner. 31-year-old Isaac Redman had spent nearly a decade working in hospitality, building a steady, ordinary life until the pandemic took it from him. When the restaurants and hotels closed, Isaac turned to something he had always done for fun, live streaming, and slowly, carefully, he began to build an audience. He learned quickly that calm, everyday content was ignored, but danger brought viewers, risk brought numbers, and numbers felt like hope. He started a series he called 30 Days of Dares. Every night, he let his viewers vote on what he would do next. The early challenges were silly and a little embarrassing, but nobody got hurt and more people started tuning in. Every time he completed a dare, he told himself the next one had to be bigger. So it was. Night after night, each challenge pushed a little further than the one before. Slowly, without him even really noticing, the line between fun and dangerous quietly disappeared. His fiancée, Emily, had watched the change happen slowly, then all at once. She no longer recognized the man she had agreed to marry, and on the afternoon of November 19th, she ended their engagement. Well, I could say I saw that coming. Isaac did not cancel the stream. He went live anyway, telling his viewers he needed something to take his mind off the worst day, and that he wanted to feel different that night. The chat had suggestions immediately. Most were jokes, but one viewer typed the words "Blackout Challenge," and others repeated it until it crowded out everything else on the screen. Isaac looked at the camera for a moment, then agreed. Isaac intentionally tightened the belt around his neck in an attempt to induce loss of consciousness. After a short period, he suddenly collapsed sideways and disappeared from the frame. The chat was filled with laughing emojis at first, assuming it was part of the act, but as the minutes passed and nothing moved on screen, the tone shifted. That moment, the viewers realized that it was no longer an act. A longtime viewer called emergency services. Another used details from Isaac's public profile to help officers locate the apartment. Paramedics broke down the door and found Isaac unconscious on the floor. They started working on him immediately and did not stop, not even during the journey to the hospital. They tried everything they had, but his heart never started beating again. By the time they arrived at the hospital, it was already too late. Isaac was pronounced dead on arrival. The medical examiner confirmed that Isaac died from hypoxic brain injury and cardiac arrest, caused by oxygen deprivation sustained during the challenge. Investigators found no evidence of foul play and ruled the death an accidental fatality. He had spent 30 days looking for the moment that would change everything, but didn't live long enough to see the change. Isaac went live on the night his engagement ended because the audience felt safer than being alone. The next story moves to a waterfall in Ontario, where a young man planned every frame of his birthday video except the one that mattered most. It was the 18th of November, 2017. In Hamilton, Ontario, at a 30-foot waterfall cascade, the surrounding trails were busy with hikers, and the natural pool at the base of the falls drew visitors who came to wade, swim, and take photographs in the shallow overflow waters below. For Lance Kenyon, it was supposed to be a celebration. Lance was 25 years old, a recent mechanical engineering graduate from a university in Texas. He was working as a freelance video editor while applying for engineering jobs. That day was his birthday. He loved turning ordinary moments into polished videos, and for weeks he had planned to film his entire birthday as a cinematic montage. Earlier that morning, Lance's parents had surprised him with a new water-resistant smartphone. By the end of 2017, dramatic outdoor photos and carefully edited videos were all over social media. Lance was not trying to become a star, he just wanted one incredible shot. He had a specific idea in his head. He would film himself doing a backflip off a 32-foot platform, then capture the moment he plunged beneath the water. He figured his phone was waterproof enough to keep recording underwater, and he imagined himself surfacing afterward with a big smile on his face. He had been planning the whole sequence for weeks. He was about to be among the few with a unique kind of experience. Lance had spent the morning filming with 3 close friends, hiking the trail, exploring the gorge, and recording birthday messages beside the rushing water, building toward that one final, unforgettable shot. As the afternoon light began to fade, he made his way up the rocky embankment to the crest of the falls with his phone already recording in selfie mode. The plunge pool below was unmonitored, with no officials managing who entered or exited the water. And as Lance prepared to jump, another visitor was swimming near the base of the falls and began moving toward the drop zone, unaware that someone above was already in motion. From 30 feet up, Lance had no idea the other swimmer was there. He jumped off from the rocky ledge, phone in hand, and threw himself into the backflip. He completed the rotation and entered the water feet first, but something was slightly off. His body had twisted just a little too far to one side, and as he hit the water, he slammed straight into the other swimmer with tremendous force. The impact was sudden and violent, and in an instant, both men were completely disoriented beneath the surface. The other swimmer was struck across the face and head, surfacing in visible distress with a deep scalp laceration, facial fractures, and a moderate concussion, and bystanders pulled him from the water immediately. Lance did not resurface. The glancing collision had been enough to knock him unconscious, and without the ability to control his body or protect his airway, he sank toward the base of the plunge pool, where his head struck the submerged rock floor with severe force, and it was there that bystanders and arriving emergency responders found him, pulling him from the water and beginning CPR on the bank while paramedics worked to stabilize him, eventually restoring his heartbeat. But the minutes without oxygen combined with the impact against the rocks had already caused catastrophic and irreversible brain injury. He never regained consciousness. They got his heart back. That's the part that makes this so hard. They got it back, and it still wasn't enough. Within 24 hours of the collision, on the morning of the 19th of November, Lance Kenyon died, surrounded by his family, on what should have been the weekend of his birthday celebration. Investigators found the area carried known risks associated with unsupervised natural swimming sites, and that the collision had occurred because the other swimmer drifted into the drop zone at the exact moment Lance entered the water, an overlap no one had anticipated and no one had been able to prevent. The cause of death was recorded as blunt head trauma, complicated by drowning and hypoxic brain injury. The other swimmer was treated at a local hospital over several days, recovering from his facial fractures and concussion, but witnesses who were present that afternoon later described him as visibly shaken at the scene, repeating that he had not seen Lance above him and had no idea anyone was jumping. The last video on Lance's birthday phone ended only seconds before the collision, and the underwater shot he had planned, the smiling close-up beneath the surface, was never recorded. Lance had planned every second of that day right up until the moment someone drifted into the wrong spot at the wrong time. The next story moves to Ohio, where a new father turned to TikTok during lockdown and let his audience talk him into something none of them understood. It was the 22nd of August, 2020, and across America, families were locked inside their homes, gyms were shuttered, and a young father in Ohio was staring at his phone, wondering how to keep the lights on. Calvin McKinney was 30 years old, a personal trainer by trade, and a new dad by 1 month. For For nearly a decade, Calvin had worked as a personal trainer, but lockdowns had emptied the gym where he coached. With clients canceling memberships and income disappearing, he turned to TikTok, filming home workouts, push-up competitions, and increasingly demanding fitness challenges from his apartment. His wife had given birth to their first child just a month earlier, and every dollar mattered. Although his following was modest, loyal viewers regularly joined his live streams, sending virtual gifts that could be converted into cash. Calvin became convinced that one viral broadcast could transform his family's finances. Because when you need money so badly, any channel begins to seem like the only hope you have left. That summer, the Benadryl challenge was spreading fast across social media. The challenge involved taking large doses of Benadryl, a common over-the-counter allergy medication, to trigger hallucinations that could be filmed and shared for views. Calvin's followers had been urging him to try it on a live stream for weeks. His wife had seen the videos circulating online and mentioned them to him, but neither of them understood just how dangerous the drug could be in large quantities. Calvin saw it differently, as a chance to spike his viewer count, collect more virtual gifts, and attract future coaching clients. That evening, he set his phone up in the living room and went live. Viewers flooded in, and Calvin was laughing with his audience as the stream began. His wife was in the next room. Their baby was a month old, and his chat was about to vote on something neither of them fully understood. But roughly 45 minutes into the live stream, the drug quietly tightened its grip. His words became harder to follow, his movements slowed, and he began reacting to things that were not there, speaking to people only he could see. Many of his viewers assumed it was part of the act. Then Calvin stiffened. His body locked rigid, and he collapsed into a full seizure. As he fell, the right side of his head struck the corner of a heavy wooden coffee table with tremendous force. The crash brought his wife running from the next room. She found him unconscious on the floor, the live stream still broadcasting to hundreds of viewers, and called emergency services. Paramedics arrived and rushed him to the hospital, where doctors quickly identified severe diphenhydramine poisoning, the result of consuming a dangerous overdose of the active ingredient in Benadryl. The seizure had caused his fall, and the fall had caused a serious traumatic brain injury. Despite seizure medication, intensive monitoring, and emergency support, the swelling inside his skull continued to grow through the night. His brain was running out of space, and his neurological function kept declining with every passing hour. Calvin McKinney was pronounced dead 8 hours after he arrived at the hospital. The medical examiner concluded that Calvin died from complications of acute diphenhydramine intoxication, with traumatic head injury sustained during a seizure significantly contributing to his death. Calvin had believed that livestream would be the one that secured his family's future. The video he hoped would change everything did, but not in any way he had imagined. He was trying to keep the lights on for his family. That's the whole story underneath this one, and it breaks my heart.